So the goal of the creator system is to move from the total or supreme creator aspect of the system down to an individual perspective within that system, and then from that perspective back to a creator perspective. Alright, so there's a story, a way to describe a larger system, a larger picture, if you will. We're basically in a creator experience system that may be simply what systems exist as, what systems are, systems of life, systems of experience, so-called dimensional realms or universes, what we call space, solar systems, superclusters, galaxies, galaxies and superclusters. And so the basic idea is that we move from a supreme creative potential, a creative viewpoint, perspective, being, individual really at that level, but it's a almost like an illusion, but that's because it's a paradox. It's a collective and an individual simultaneously, and that is a supreme creator of all experiences, present in all times and states, places, frequencies, perspectives. And so then from that there is, and so that being passes down, moves down through a kind of gradient, layer after layer, from larger collective into individual experience. And so the unique idea here is that you can have one layer, then the next, and the next, and there's a pathway, and there's a pathway down through those boundaries into each layer. But the unique idea behind the human is that you have the supreme level, and you have a direct channel from the creators between the supreme and the direct individual awareness connected to the kind of consciousness, biological experience, biologically generated consciousness experience of the person, the individual person, if they follow the layers up, correctly aligning themselves each way, then they become one with the true supreme collective creator. It's kind of different between saying they become and become one with. It's almost the same, but to say it's exactly the same is to ignore the actual idea behind the process. So, experiences, the idea behind this now, the dynamic, is basically, imagine that you are to become, your perspective will move from who you are, regardless, into the creative potential, into the supreme creator, knowing oneness with that being. So now the idea here is, if who you are now lives in respect, under the perspective of, or in the perspective of, who you are as an individual, without placing that individual inside the correlation, the relation, even the reflection of that higher creative potential, the higher being, the supreme creator, then when your perspective moves to the level of that creative potential, you will basically not have a connection in reason between the two layers. Meaning, if you are to become that creative potential, and right now you don't know that, and you don't live like that, and you don't live for that, and you don't respect that, then when you do become that creative potential, that personality, that cosmic sense, would look back, if you will, reflecting on who you are now, and it would not see itself represented in who you are now. It would see something else. And so it would be like losing yourself. Nothing ever changes, but it would be like a day you woke up and you kind of weren't acting yourself that day. Eventually, if there's enough of that, that gets quote unquote erased or forgotten. Excuse me. Kind of early. It gets forgotten. And there's nothing ever truly forgotten, but there's a core. There's a core of individual selves that remain true from the perspective of being one with the Creator, moving down through the levels, being one with the individual, and that individual living in credence, respect, harmony, awareness, knowledge of this pattern, this process, and living as if they are living for or in the light, the reason, the personality, the priority of that higher creative force. Then, when that personality traverses backwards, upwards, through the layers, each layer successively, they retain their original identity, both from the God level, or more so the creative potential, moving into, because, goddess, moving into the earthly body. They retain the idea of God and goddess, more so the goddess, because women create life, men don't create life. Technically, men destroyed a lot. And so then they become the human who still knows God. Goddess, still knows the creative potential. And it's like the creative potential has not lost power, has not lost and been forgotten on Earth. And then when that Earth individual moves back to the creative potential, the collective cosmic force, okay, then that force still knows and stays with the awareness of that individual, the human earthly potential and personality. So the two don't forget each other, meaning the person lives with the creative potential, and the creative potential lives with the person, and one is with and within one another. And so it's all about perspective. It's kind of like saying if you're a truck driver and on Saturday you become a school teacher, but if you remember all throughout the week while you're a truck driver that you become a school teacher, then you get to class on Saturday and you teach all about everything you learned. If you forget, then you get to class and it's like you're unprepared. And similarly, if you are a school teacher on Saturday and you forget that Monday you're going to become a truck driver and kind of lose focus, or there's a possibility of losing focus, and you don't leave a note or remind yourself in some way or simply make an effort, then when you go and become a truck driver, you're going to get in situations that aren't going to be beneficial towards remembering and towards bringing back the knowledge back to the classroom so that you can make use of it. It's all about perspective. It's just simply perspective. It's still kind of confusing to you look at it even in a mundane way like that. It's better even to look at it like you become somebody else. You become another being, a larger being. Because there you can see how it would be confusing to remember, to the point where it's like we're playing a game, being human. And when we move back to the higher layer, the higher level, we have to bring the knowledge that we have as a human. And what knowledge we have as a human is dependent on what we remember while we're human. And so, and what we create. And so if we create based upon remembering or lack of remembering who we are, and who we are isn't aligned with who we were originally, then who we become is not connected with who we actually originally are. You see, so then we become something we're not, and that doesn't make sense. It creates a distortion in the cosmic mind, and that information doesn't really have a place. It goes into a back burner, if you will. But eventually there's a core set of personalities that remain true because they never forgot. Those are the so-called hosts of heaven. They're the cosmic family, eternal heavenly family. They don't go anywhere. If a person remembers, they join them. And if they did remember, then they never left. And they always were them. So it's like an eternal paradox of being and time. And so that's the idea, how we're living here and now, what we're giving credence to, in terms of who we are, and where our energy is going. If we get to the place of the cosmic creative potential and we look back and say, that's me on Earth. I was a creator on Earth. And I was living and looking up at the higher potential in an earthly body and being in praise and appreciation of the creative potential. If we're not living like that, we're living in damnation, then when we get to the creative potential, we look back and say, who was that? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't look like me. I hold no connection to that. It's all simply perspective. But the idea is that goes on eternally, and we can't fathom how deep that goes and how good it feels. So another way to visualize this is to look at or imagine if you're in a tub of water or a pool of water and there are waves of motion, energy exchange within that pool that are already there. And so in entering the pool, namely as an individual, the idea is to create change or motion under your own free-willed volition. So that's the point of the individual. And so if you create energy or change, you move energy really, under your own volition in this area where there's already waves of energy and change being distributed, then you can move in sync with those already present motions, or you can move out of sync with them. If you're out of sync, you'll create disharmony. So if you create disharmony, you will technically create a more abrasive, contrasting experience. In other words, you can kind of say there's more of your own awareness there. It's really consciousness in the moment, because there's this chaos taking place, and that's what you do. You own that. But say you were to leave the pool and you get out, and now your source of those disturbances are no longer present there. Your identity, your information is no longer capable of being rendered there. You're no longer present, basically. If someone were to know your frequency, know those specific splashes that you make in your individual distortions, if they were to look after you left, they would not be able to find you. So now imagine if you are there and you're making the waves of motion and you're moving in sync, and you're moving in sync with the energy, the changes, the patterning of energy, the distribution of the waves of motion that are already present. So there's like these background waves taking place that are always there, and you, in being there, under your own free-willed volition, entering into a phase of interaction where you become synchronized, your motion moves in sync with these background waves that are already present. You synchronize with them, and you move in unison. Now, from that perspective, from the Discordian or chaos perspective, there's less of your awareness there And it's actually consciousness again, because it's the stimulation, the initial burst of realization that is non-sustaining, which is related to sensory, fleshy desires and the short-term rewards of immediate personal discordian changes or energies or motivations, if you will, when your free will is aligned with those types of results. And so they would say that there's no fun there. However, if you align perfectly with these waves and you're in unison with this overall structure of energy that is in flux and motion with the background system, background like a blueprint that's always there and is what the whole system is structured out of, then when you leave that pool, that tub, whatever you want to look at it as, when you're no longer individually present there and your own free-willed volition has stopped making those motions, say you or someone else in the pool, or you or someone else from outside the pool, had your specific frequency of information and basically looked inside that pool to find that information based upon that frequency that you emitted while moving in unison with the background energy that was there, the supreme energy, then technically you would not be there. But that presence, the identity, that information would be, because that information that's eternally there would be what you made your own energy, would be the motions that you moved slowly at first and then in synchronization with those eternal energies. So technically you wouldn't be there, and eventually it would be that you simply never left, and that you also never arrived, that you were always there, that you are what was always there, what will always be there, and I guess are still there right now, or at any point. And so by moving in sync with that eternal energy, that background motion that's already there, that blueprint, you unify your energy, your will, your motions, your literal frequency imprint, like waves coming off of a boat, a wake, your temporal wake in time and causality. You align that frequency with the eternal pattern that it generates everything, that generates all states, all individuals, all awareness, all possibilities. So that's unifying with that underlying eternal system. And it's just like moving in a pool, and you can kind of visualize as well, physically, sensually, as if you were in a pool, and there were some waves moving around, and how if you move against those waves, you feel a pressure. Now imagine you swing your hands a certain way, kind of dip and flow with those waves, and you kind of lose the perception of being in water. It's not hard to move. You're not fighting the current. You're flowing with it. It's pulling you along, or you're moving with it. You're flowing with it. You're in sync. And so that's the idea of moving with a supreme creative will instead of our own individual will, because we can produce harmony, or we can use our individual will to connect with a supreme creative force. And when we do so, we induce states of health, harmony, balance, truth, power, self-awareness, and a whole series of emotions, results that are more powerful than the discordian action. And again, discordian action gives an immediate yet temporary result. It's like a drug. One must continue to do that. And once they're out of that system, they're gone forever. There's no way of saying, they're there in the background in the discordian, disharmonic, chaotic frequencies. Because that's kind of like saying somebody's there. It would be like a shadow puppet, and saying that the shadow puppet is there in the background off the screen where there's only darkness. That doesn't really work. It's the same concept technically, but technically there's only darkness there. Now if it was a shining light puppet, if you will, you can technically say that the substance of that is in the background, where there is the higher contrast of light, where it's shining bright, like say a signal lamp where you put a covering over the lamp and there's a projection in the sky or something. Well, technically, the outside of that shaded part, if it's not fully shadow, there's more light. And so, in that area of more light is where that is kept. And that's the informational foundation of the frequencies that generates a person, or at least the consciousness of a person. And so, by merging our frequencies, and not really merging, but just moving in unison with some overall plan for harmony, we're connecting with the original blueprint, which existed, one could say was encoded in to every other existence at the point of creation. And it's literally like dancing with the energy and kind of being carried by it versus trying to forge our own path through disharmonization or disharmony with the energies around us and the natural energies, and producing something from that, but something that is not in alignment with the whole. Meaning that eventually, sooner or later, whatever is produced from that gets washed away. Because eventually, everything moves into alignment with the whole. Whatever is secondary or individually present through that disturbance pattern is only temporarily effective. That's the key. That's the true key to immortality. That through, and really everlasting life, which is eternal, that moving in unison, in sync with the overall harmony, allows one to take that individualized pattern and match it to the same pattern that will be present when that individual perspective shifts back into the collective. And this is by the collective, it's shifts back into the omnipresent original perspective, which is what people call God or Goddess, and is really a supreme creative potential. And so, the identity that we create, the waves of motion, the imprint, the temporal wake, is what determines our overall energetic signature. Because all our actions, all our choices through time, all our bioemissions, they're actually interconnected as one fluid motion. It's like each day we have an expression out of our instrument, which is the body, but an entire life is actually a song being played by the instrument, or the guide of the instrument, the awareness. And so we see day by day each instrument or each lever being pressed, or however the instrument is played. And in reality, it's one fluid motion. So it also means that if there's disharmony one day, well, if there's majority of harmony in the other days, then eventually the overall song will be harmonic or harmonized. So it's kind of like a ratio or a percentage or relativity. It's not an ultimatum or an exact. An exaction, an exactitude. And so our energy collectively over all our actions, and choices, and developments, if they multiply and fit congruently within the overall pattern of creation, then we match those frequencies and fit, and our energies nest inside of the higher higher energy, the higher map or spectrum of energies that everything else fits within, and we paint ourselves or etch ourselves into eternity. The paradox is that if one is to do this, then it is not a happening, it is not an event, it is something that always was. Because how can you etch yourself in to something that always was? You can't add to eternity. So one is either always in eternity, always there, always has been, always will be, and is there right now, or they aren't. There's really no midway. There is a delay between those who realize this, and this is kind of has to do with repentance and this bending of the percentage or the potential in the moment. Say, before a person finalizes their trajectory in the physical realm, in that final moment they can convert pain and suffering into appreciation, and it is as if you could say the further down a person is into disharmony, well, they're so out of harmony that there's such a rift between harmony and them that how they interact from there on, when they face that, how they turn that around, how they accept the inevitable and go gracefully into the future, can be the most harmonious motion that they've created in their entire life. And that motion out of the darkness of somebody who has lived in suffering and ignorance can be more harmonious than somebody who lived in harmony their entire life. Because there can be such a charge, such an energy in that repentance, that they basically convert that negative compression into an expansion, and it boosts them up. And so as long as a person knows that, then they can convert their charge back around the other way and match their frequencies, and in that final moment exhibit such an intense expansion or explosion of a will, an appreciation, an application of their intentions to move in harmony and shut out all 80 years of ignorance, and all of a sudden just goes away, it flushes away just like that, then that could be the most harmonious action that basically overpowers and is more intense than 80 years of living in ignorance. But the idea behind it is one can't fake that. You can't live in ignorance and then go, it's okay because later I'm going to feel sorry and I'm going to apologize and it'll be better. That doesn't work. You can't fake it. It only works for people who simply basically accidentally do that and live in ignorance, and then luckily right before the end figure out what's going on. No one can actually plan on repenting and go into ignorance and what is called sin, or really forgetfulness of that harmonious nature, that matching of frequencies. And so they can't you can't fake it, basically. It doesn't work. And so, I mean, people can try. Yeah, and it's the intensity in that can be great enough to overpower the past moments of ignorance, and that throws energy back. And so that compression energy, with that whole concept, there's basically the idea that one is basically pulsating out bioemissions which are matching frequencies either to the greater harmony of the universe or they are producing disharmony and kind of like distractions. So this kind of goes in line with previous video on how belief basically guides everything. It's actually a post, but I've mentioned this in a video before. So if you believe in the harmony and you demonstrate this, basically living in credence with that, then this acts as a representation energetically, which anchors you in to the greater harmony that exists in the universe. And then you get basically quantum soul mechanics, where one can produce more intense actions that focus and exhibit or demonstrate these energies, these intentions on the spot. And this leads into magic, notably black magic, to produce the opposite and to create disharmonies, which are then wielded like power, which can be thrown at a person to produce disharmony or problems with them or otherwise. And that's where those who have harmony, they have a shield around them because it's like a standing wave, meaning it's solidified. So if somebody attempts to use disharmony, it bounces off like a reflection bouncing off of glass and comes back. So this was a little bit and then some on the idea behind the creative experience or the creator experience and the levels that one travels through and how to maintain memory and cognition from one level to the next.